You think living with your parents after marriage is already hard? Try imagining no private room and no lockable door. No soundproof walls. Not even the right to pretend. I'm busy, then close the door, as if it were civilization's last shield. Now, pull that scene back, tens of thousands of years. A group of people sleeping around a fire. Children lying close to adults. Old people coughing in the dark. Someone turning over, someone adding more wood, and almost everyone knows who is where. It sounds a little funny, but this is a very real problem, because humans have love, jealousy, spouses, children, secret desires, and also the need to be left in peace. But for most of history, we lived in small groups packed closely together. It was very hard to disappear from other people's eyes. So how did ancient people handle privacy? When there were no bedrooms, go behind a rock and wait for everyone to sleep. Maybe, but that is only the easiest answer. The real question is not what they did or where. The real question is how humans invented privacy before there was a door to close. And the answer is much stranger. Before bedrooms existed, humans invented something more subtle: discretion. Do not assume ancient people lived freely, as if everyone could do whatever they wanted. That is a very easy trap to fall into. We often imagine the past as a wild place, with fewer rules, less shame, and less scrutiny, but in a small group, the truth may be the opposite. You do not have many places to hide from social consequences. A strange glance, an argument, a jealous person, a child being born, an alliance shifting out of place, all of it could become the whole group's business. In 2011, anthropologists Kim Hill and his colleagues analyzed 32 modern hunter-gatherer societies, with more than 5,000 people in total. They found that residential group sizes were usually not very large. On average, around a few dozen adults. That number sounds small, but precisely because it is small, every relationship is harder to hide. This is not a city. You can disappear among millions of people, and no one cares who you just argued with. This is a few dozen people who must eat together, move together, rely on one another to watch children, share food, share fire, and still face one another the next morning. Therefore, privacy has never been only a matter between two people. It was the first test of communal life. But if there were no private rooms, where did privacy come from? Not from walls. Not from door locks. Not from a do not disturb sign. It came from the way humans arranged space. A living camp was not necessarily just a crowd of people lying randomly around a fire. There would be sleeping areas, cooking areas, tool-making areas, places to store things, paths leading to water B, the edge of camp where fewer people passed by. Simply put, there were no bedrooms yet, but there was already a center and a margin. And the margin was very important. There, the firelight was weaker, voices were quieter, and others had fewer reasons to pass through. Sometimes, just moving a few dozen steps from the center, humans already had something almost like a door. Not a door made of wood, but a door made of distance. At Sabudu Cave in South Africa, the team of archaeologists, Lynn Wadley, once found traces of plant bedding from around 77,000 years ago. This does not directly prove anything about couples, but it suggests that humans knew how to organize resting places very early on. They did not simply fall down and sleep wherever they happened to be. They knew how to prepare a place to lie down. They knew how to choose materials. They knew how to make a space more livable. So the first answer was not hiding. It was knowing how to use distance. And before walls existed, distance was humanity's first door. But there was one problem. Distance only works when other people agree to respect it. If the whole group keeps staring, gossiping, or trying to guess who is doing what, then a few dozen steps are no different from standing in the middle of camp. Therefore, privacy is not only found in a hidden place, it lies in a very human skill, pretending not to see. It sounds a little funny, but this may be one of the oldest forms of courtesy, the most ancient ones. A couple leaves the firelight. Others understand the hint. Do not ask and do not stare too long. They do not turn it into a joke in front of the whole group. Not because everyone is naive, but because if everything is dragged into the light, the group will quickly grow exhausted by itself. Imagine a night in camp, the fire burning low. A young person stands up and walks into the darkness. Another person follows. A child is about to ask, but the mother pulls the child back down. An elder says it, then slowly turns his face toward the embers, as if those embers had suddenly become the most interesting thing in the world. No one says anything, but everyone understands. Perhaps civilization did not begin with great walls. It began from the moment a person knew when to turn away. Discretion, in a sense, is a survival technology. It helps humans live very close together, without turning shared life into a social nightmare. But do not misunderstand. Communities did not always turn away. Discretion only existed while things remained within the safe zone. Once private matters began to threaten the common order, the whole group would notice immediately. And in a small group, that happened very quickly. A jealous person and a couple in conflict. A broken promise. A child born with unclear responsibility. It sounds like family drama, but for ancient people, it could be a matter of survival, because they did not have many options for avoiding one another. If you disliked someone, you could not simply block them online, and you could not switch to another company. You could not book a 3-day, 2-night healing trip, then return as if nothing had happened. You still had to hunt with them and gather with them, share fire with them, and if wild beasts appeared, sometimes they might be the ones pulling you to safety. So the community was both a curtain and the first security camera. It covered what should not be spoken aloud. But it also watched very closely anything that could fracture the whole group. This is the important twist. Love could be private, but the consequences of love were rarely private. And that is why marriage became important. Not because ancient people suddenly wanted to hold beautiful weddings, and not because they already had invitations, banquet tables, flower gates, and an uncle who stood up to speak for far too long. Marriage, at a deeper level, was the community's way of placing a fence around intimacy. It answered very practical questions. Who is responsible for whom? Which network does the child belong to? Which two families, which two groups, or which two lineages would be connected? Who is allowed to be close to whom? And which relationships would be seen as crossing the line? A 2011 study by Robert Walker, Kim Hill, Mark Flynn, and Ryan Ellsworth argued that marriage has a very deep history in human society, but its forms are extremely diverse. In some places, personal choice matters. In others, relatives are heavily involved. In some places, marriage also brings exchange, obligations, and alliances between groups. In other words, humans do not only love, humans organize love. Because if something so private is not organized, it can quickly become a social fire. But the social fence is not only found in marriage, it is also found in a very familiar feeling: shame. It may sound small, but shame is an extremely powerful piece of social control software. It makes people to stop before the whole group has to intervene. You do not need someone to shout. Don't do that. Just a glance, a silence, or the feeling of being judged is enough to make behavior change direction. In group life, this is very important, because not everything needs to become a law. Some boundaries exist through habit, through avoidance, through understanding that certain things should not be done in front of others. Quiet taboos, courtesy, or the feeling of embarrassment are not only there to make people blush, they help the group collide less often. The strange thing is that humans do not erase instinct. We teach it to walk more gently, to speak more softly, and to stop at the right moment. Instinct does not disappear. Society teaches it manners. Then humans began to build houses. That sounds like a perfect turning point for privacy, doesn't it? There were walls, roofs, and fixed shelter. So surely private matters became much easier, but not so fast. In many ancient and traditional societies, a house was not like a modern apartment. It was often a multi-purpose space. By day, a place for cooking, repairing things, watching children, and receiving guests. By night, it became a place where many people slept. One roof did not mean every couple had a room. Multiple generations could live together. Children, old people, relatives, belongings, animals, and the hearth fire, all crowded into the same life. Honestly, this is not so unfamiliar. Many families only a few generations ago also lived in houses with very few lockable doors. Therefore, houses did not instantly create privacy. They only changed the problem. Before, it was the camp edge, darkness, and discretion. Now it was the corner of the house, timing, habits, and still discretion. Humans built houses first. Only much later did they truly build private rooms. And here is the slightly uncomfortable twist. Today, we imagine we have solved that problem. We have private rooms, private beds, private phones, private passwords, private headphones. We even have incognito mode, which sounds very impressive, although it is not always as hidden as we think. But privacy does not simply disappear or appear so easily. It only changes shape. An ancient person had to live before the eyes of the whole camp. While we live before the eyes of screens, cameras, messages, photos, history, searches, location data, and exhausting expectations about love. In the past, other people might know where you were. Today, sometimes the system even remembers what you looked at, what you liked, where you stopped, and what time you deleted a message. So perhaps we are not much more private than ancient people. At least not as much as we think. We have merely moved from the fire to the screen, from the eyes of the community to trails of data, and the old question is still there. How much private space do humans need to truly be themselves? So in the end, how did ancient people handle privacy? Perhaps there is no single answer. Sometimes it was distance, sometimes darkness, sometimes it was the right timing. Sometimes it was a corner of the house, an edge of camp, or a path leading away from the firelight. But more importantly, it was the silent agreement of the whole group. One person knew not to look too long, another knew not to ask too deeply. A community knew that some things should not be dragged into the crowd. The original question sounds a little awkward, but it actually touches something very deep. Humans learned how to live close together. Without swallowing one another, we need community to survive. But we also need a private space to remain ourselves. Before there were lockable doors, humans learned how to turn away. And perhaps, in today's age of screens, that lesson has not grown old at all. Do you think we have more privacy than ancient people? Or are we merely being watched in a more sophisticated way